Every once in a while, you come up with an idea that seems like it's been done before, whether it was Netflix or PureFlix, but here we are, one that is dedicated specifically to Orthodox Christians and Orthodox Christianity. It is called Logo Cinema. Today, I have the founders with me, Andrew Stokich and Zach Delaney. Gentlemen, how are you today?
We're doing great. How are you doing?
Great.
Listen, I'm excited to talk to you. It's no secret. I've often told people I am an Orthodox Christian. You two as well. The cross is very prominent around Andrew's neck at the moment, and Zach has been hiding his.
I got mine.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
that's actually a really good story that we could probably talk about on the podcast today.
Well, it'll be great. Take us through how you decided, first of all, the name Logo Cinema, and then why you decided to create a primarily Orthodox, a primarily Orthodox streaming service, but it's not 100% theology based. There's quite a few different layers to it.
Yeah, so I think I'll start off with talking about the name Logo Cinema. So we've been working on this project for a little over a year now, doing research, just making sure all the I's are dotted, T's crossed. And early on, we really wanted to make sure we had a name that was brandable, something that spoke to Orthodox Christians, but also to people who aren't Orthodox. So initially, I think the first name we came up with was Kairos Studios. Very Greek,
Right.
but very Orthodox.
Yeah.
And we love that name because we felt this was God's time for having an Orthodox streaming platform.
If you want to explain what Kairos
do you know what Kairos means?
Explain it to the audience. I mean, this
Yeah.
isn't an insider conversation.
This is true. That's a good point. So in Greek, there's actually two different words for time. You have chronos and kairos, and I'm probably pronouncing it totally wrong, but that's as good as my Greek gets. Chronos is what the time, like the regular flow of time is. So 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., so on and so forth. That's what we live most of our lives by. Kairos is God's time. It is also translated as the opportune time. Fun fact, theologically speaking, at the start of the liturgy, it's not the priest who starts the liturgy. It's the deacon who approaches the priest, who then says, "Blessed Master, it is time to act," meaning it is God has blessed the time to act. And that's kind of why, if you've ever gone into an Orthodox divine liturgy, maybe it starts at 10 or 9 a.m., but it's never really exactly 10 or 9 a.m. It could be a few minutes before, could be a few minutes after that time. It is God's time. It's not man's time. So we really loved that name, but we felt that it was a little too obscure for your average American, first of all. It might have been just a little too heady. And we then kind of went back to the drawing board. And as we were doing that, we said, well, what's one word that all Christians agree on? And as we were starting to do that research, we found out logos is like one of the few theological words that all three major forms of Christianity, Protestants as an umbrella, Catholics, and Orthodox all agree upon. And so,
And just a quick in too, logos, ethos, pathos, these are all terms that even people who are maybe secular or not Christian could also understand, because it's a universal term as well.
So that's how we came up with that name.
I like the name. I also like the logo. There is the cross in the middle of the play button. How did you decide also on the color scheme of it?
Ooh.
So that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
We have a dear friend. His name is Vanja Franek. He's a Serbian. I think he might be Bosnian actually, who's also Orthodox. We both were co-workers with him, and we actually commissioned him to do the work. We kind of gave him the idea of we know we want to incorporate the cross within it somehow. However, we didn't want it to be very maybe super in your face. We wanted to feel like it was naturally a part of the logo, to the point where it was understandable from someone from a Christian background, but also approachable from someone who isn't on that path quite yet. And the
colors specifically were actually taken. It's almost like a little Easter egg. the colors specifically were taken from actual Orthodox icons and kind of put in a gradient. So all the colors of that color scheme you see are present in Orthodox icons as well.
Yeah, we kind of gave
It's
them
not a
free
rainbow.
rein. Yeah, yeah, that was our first thing when we saw it. We first were like, "Oh, it's a rainbow." Okay, interesting choice. And then as he went through and presented it to us, he was like, "These are actually all the colors that are presented into in an icon." And so we felt that after he gave us his thoughts, I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And he was quick to point out, he's like, it's not really a rainbow. It's missing a few colors that you would see in a rainbow. But I was also like, Christ gave us, not just Christ, but God gave man the rainbow. It doesn't, now we use it for different things in the world, but it was first a symbol from God to man for, hey, I'm not going to flood the earth ever again. Netflix and Disney Plus and Apple, like in a app bar. And when he did that, it stuck out compared to everyone else. And we were like, okay, this makes perfect sense. So like that is, we gave him the full creative freedom, which is actually, it's a deep part of our business as well. Like, sure, we're going to have original content and everything as we go further in this interview. We'll talk about that. But we wanted to let him show his God-given talents and the work that God has blessed him to do.
All right. One thing that's interesting is that, I mentioned PureFlix earlier, and that's primarily an evangelical streaming service. And it's typically, evangelical stories aren't necessarily the same as, what, let's say, Mark Wahlberg is doing. If you saw Uncle Stu, that's definitely not a family film, but it is definitely a very Catholic film. And, in the life of Uncle Stu and how he redeems himself, and through his redemption, now he's suffering and has the health issues from all the years of abuse. And we realize that God rewards you within your suffering. So, where are we finding the balance between PureFlix and, Mark Wahlberg's type stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a perfect, those are great examples to use. And I think, at least for me growing up, I'm actually a convert to Orthodoxy. So
Delaney doesn't seem like a very Eastern European or Middle Eastern name.
Very Irish.
Yeah.
Irish. So I grew up in a completely secular family, secular home. So I wasn't exposed to a lot of these Christian ethics, morals, the phronema, the mindset. So I was exposed to a lot of different things. But what I noticed growing up, and what was a deterrent for me personally, actually, I loved films. I loved watching films. But when I thought of Christian films, the first thing that came to mind, and the only things really that I was exposed to, barring, with one exception being Passion of the Christ, were very cheesy Hallmark movies that actually drove me away even further from even considering Christianity as a possibility. So coming into Orthodoxy, it totally opened my mind to all of the nuance that I think is neglected in art that is completely reflective of our life and experience, not only as humans, but as Orthodox Christians, as Christians. And sometimes that includes the bad and the ugly, and seeing the main character fall down, seeing the main character mess up, seeing the hero fail. But the biggest thing that we can see and take the stories of the saints and even the story of Christ himself is the redemptive arc, is the triumph over evil. And I think striking that balance, and it is going to be a lot of work. We don't want to be too gratuitous with it, gratuitous with violence or with sexual themes or, deeper sinful activities. But we certainly don't want to shy away from it, because it is something that we all experience.
Right. St. Mary of Egypt would definitely be a documentary, not a biopic.
Yes. Yeah. Although part of how we even came to this conclusion was Zach and I have been filmmakers for many, many years. And a lot of our films had religious themes in it. And it was last year that we ran into our first time really working within Hollywood. We were working on a production that was potentially going to be picked up by Discovery. And it had nothing to do with anything religious. It was all about mental health and building race cars. And the feedback we got back was, we're going to actually pass on this just because the mental health issue can be too political. And I said, wow, if they think this is too political, none of the things we've ever written is ever going to get picked up because it's too, the religious themes are too strong. And so that's another piece that fueled us to get started on Logos Cinema in particular. Could we have tried to go to like an Angel Studios or something of that nature? Potentially. However, Orthodoxy is the only denomination, to use that word, just to kind of define it here, that doesn't have anything like that. And we know that there's people hungry for it. Man of God is a great example of that. On our social media, I think the second one we hear the most is the Agios Paisios show that's been produced in Greece that you cannot find here in the States, except through a sketchy Dropbox link, which there's so many things wrong with that. But that's where we're kind of wanting to change that culture. We know that Orthodox people want this. And I think it's not just Orthodox people. I think it would bring a breath of fresh air to the Christian audience throughout the world of being able to see stories that they relate to. For me, being a cradle, my inspiration for film comes from my grandfather. He introduced me to The Lord of the Rings. It was the first PG-13 film that I had ever seen. My parents were very strict about ratings when I was growing up, and I was 10, so I was not allowed to see The Fellowship of the Ring, but my grandfather talked him into it. And he passed away after we saw The Return of the King about 2 weeks later. And that was the first time I had ever experienced death in my life. And that's actually what made me want to be a filmmaker, is because I was able to find the joy and the beauty through that storytelling that inspired me to do what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I think like Zach and I really complement each other in that way of wanting to tell stories that really matter and that also bring Christ's message in a true parable fashion, not just, we don't want to do essentially, not to really say names, but like, I think the most famous Christian film that's made fun of is God's Not Dead, because all that is an hour-and-a-half sermon, right? So we don't want to do stuff like that. We want to do stuff that, even if you're not a Christian, you're interested in the story. And maybe that's that one little seed that gets planted and grows over time, not by our doing, but through God's will to grow into a beautiful tree.
And will there be conversations between the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox? Because most people don't realize we're not in communion with each other. We haven't been in communion with each other for 1,700 years, even though we've been opening up dialogue, because people are going to want to find the balance of that, because they might feel excluded. How is that going to allow them in? How are we going to deal with the hardliners that want nothing to do with the Oriental Orthodox Church? Things of that sort, and finding the balance.
That's a great question. And to be quite fair, because we're both in the Eastern Orthodox Church, we haven't been approached by many Orientals as of yet. But with that said, it is right, and it has the phronema of something that we all can agree on. Not to sound ecumenist here, because we're not trying to change the church. Right. What we're trying to do is tell great stories that can uplift and inspire people. So as long as the story, like if it's made by someone, even if they're not Orthodox, but the story they're telling has the phronema of an Orthodox Christian's perspective, we're going to want to look at that and see how it's telling its story at the end of the day to make a judgment call. So I think it's a case by case basis, one-offs. But as of right now, we haven't been approached by anyone.
And please explain phronema for the people that are going to want to try to figure it out, because
I'm going to let Zach take that
Yeah.
one because he's the one who introduced that word to me. That's my cradle coming out right
no
here.
way. Phronema essentially boils down to the mindset, the worldview that you have. So we say Orthodox phronema, the Orthodox worldview, the mindset, the way that you perceive everything.
You know, one thing that's interesting in all of this, so like Andrew, my family has been Orthodox from the get-go. I refer to myself as Gen 1, you know, because my family's from the Middle East, so literally the apostolic age. And when they say they called us Christian in the book of Acts at Antioch, I just look at everybody and go, hi, that's us. It's interesting to see because, like, you know, English is my third language, but it's my primary one because I was born here. But the thing is that, like, you know, I had to learn so many terms in English. You know, like, I didn't know the term cassock in English until I started talking to people, you know, because we're used to raka. And then we, you know, various other things and phrases that I'm like, what are they talking about? And then I'd have to go look it up. I was like, oh, that's what it is in English. So it's very interesting coming from an ethnic background to, you know, a Western church, not necessarily Western, but, you know, a Western society dominated parish.
Yeah.
And trying to understand what they're talking about, you know, and the phrasing, because the Catholics use the same phrasing in English that we do, but when we're saying it in either Greek or Arabic or whichever, you know, it has a different definition. You know, and I don't know if Andrew had a similar experience in having to learn the terms in English versus.
No, I even though I'm a cradle, my family history is very interesting. So my father grew up Serbian Orthodox. My mother is primarily Mexican, but she's really an American mutt, because if I really were to take a look at the genealogy of stuff, she's a little bit of everything. So I simplify it and I say she's Mexican and like Spaniard. But there's a lot of other things in there. With that, when my parents were getting married, the old ladies at the Serbian church were not quite happy with my father that he wasn't marrying a Serbian woman. However, they were all kind of teaming up with him, trying to tell the priest, like, unless she converts right now, like, can't get married, which the church has economia for marrying someone who is a Catholic to an Orthodox Christian. And they ended up going to St. George, which is an Antiochian parish, predominantly very much Middle Eastern, fresh off the boat. Like, the majority of people are first generation from like Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, everywhere in the Middle East. So for me, I always learn the things in English. The priest there can speak 7 languages fluently. Father Chris Salami. Wow, Father Chris Salami. I almost messed up his name right there. Yeah, Father Chris Salami. But he predominantly does it in English, which is what I would also say is why St. George is one of the largest parishes, probably close to the largest in the greater metropolitan Phoenix area, with over 1,000 parishioners on a normal Sunday.
Yeah.
And then on a high day, we're literally outside of the church. There's people going all the way outside of the church.
It's like an Orthodox megachurch.
Yeah.
I can say that.
Cathedral. Let's
Cathedral, sorry, yes.
Cathedral.
But he's done an incredible job of bringing people into the church. My mother being one of them. She didn't convert until I was 12 years old. And he was the man who was able to help her cross that gap from Catholicism into Orthodoxy. And it took her time. Like, and everyone's journey is different. So I have a great, like, what's the word here? I'm drawing a blank here. I have great empathy for people who are interested in Orthodoxy, but they can't make that jump quite yet. Because you know what? Like, God reveals it to us in that Kairos time,
right,
when it is the right time for us to be able to receive the fullness of the faith. So that's kind of my story right there. So to answer your question, no, I learned everything in English. That was a long story, but it was mainly in English.
Right. Well, here's another aspect that I didn't learn till I was older. All right. So the term Antiochian is not common in the Middle East.
Yep.
All right. We're called Rum Orthodox, which is the Greek Orthodox Church. So for me, my whole life was like, oh, I'm Greek Orthodox under the Patriarch of Antioch. And to translate it to English, people started saying Antiochian Orthodox. But the problem with that is if you go to the Middle East, you can't say that because the Syriac Orthodox Church, which is part of the Oriental Orthodox Church, is an Antiochian Orthodox Church. The Greek Orthodox Church under the Patriarch of Antioch, John X, is an Antiochian Orthodox Church. So the term Antiochian is very much a Western English term, because if you go to the Middle East and you say that to somebody, they're going to look at you like you grew a second head because it's Greek Orthodox. So you're just Greek Orthodox under the Patriarch of Antioch. So like if you're in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and you go, oh, I'm Greek Orthodox, they automatically know that you're under the Patriarch of Antioch.
Interesting fact. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then same with Jerusalem. If you say you're Greek Orthodox, they automatically know that you're Palestinian under the Patriarch of Jerusalem. So it's not, it's interesting stuff that you learn when it translates to English.
Yeah, there's so much like that even me as a convert, I'm interested in and wanting to learn. And I think even just that little fact goes to show the depth that the Orthodox faith has that may be lost on Western audiences, but with Logos Cinema and platforms and content like that, we hope to bring some of that to the growing Orthodox population.
There's Orthodox Wisdom on YouTube that does, short little videos using iconography as part of the transition. For a secular audience, I hate to use this term, but it's the only thing I can compare it to, would be a motion comic.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking to follow their model in some of the mini docs, or are you looking to do more in-depth visual aids? Like, how are you looking to do documentaries versus features?
So there is a lot of documentaries out currently for the Orthodox community. So primarily right now, we have a bunch of people who have reached out to us with Orthodox documentaries. We really feel it's imperative to grow out of just the documentary side and into the feature film side. Documentaries are approachable for a certain type of audience who is looking for an educational style of content. But for the masses, we need to have stories that people can approach. Man of God was a starting point for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see what Jelena Popovich does with St. Moses the Black. Because the story, from what I've read, is going to take place like in present day.
It takes place in present day Chicago.
Yeah, and that'll really be the first time that a saint's hagiography is used as a basis to tell a story that's set in modern times, that's kind of used as a baseline to tell a story to a modern audience who could relate to it a bit more, as opposed to telling one that's more of a period piece that's set 1,200 years ago. And we're not against that.
Yeah, I think there's room for both. Like essentially,
exactly.
we're going to have short films on there and mini documentaries, but that's not going to be the main reason why we want people to join Logos Cinema. We want them to join for the deeper stories that will be created and told. However, the other mission is to help these creators who are on YouTube get off of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be frank here, YouTube doesn't push the algorithm of orthodoxy as strong because it's not the message that they're trying to sell. And further, we want to make sure that these creators are able to be rewarded fairly for their work. During our research, we found out that the average per 1,000 views that you get on YouTube, you get paid out roughly $4.83. And the reason why that's just the average is some people have different sponsorships and get different ad placement, and they might make a little bit more money. But that is literally from the research is the average. And for people who are doing like podcasts, which are mainly educational focused, we're looking at being able to pay them 10 cents per streaming hour. So that way they can actually produce these things and make a living at producing them and not be competing against the rest of the field of YouTube on there.
A lot of them too need other streams of revenue. If you look at a lot of the creators out there, especially Harmony. Harmony, if I can shout their name out, they produce some amazing animated Orthodox work. And even them, they have a Patreon that they use as well, because like he just mentioned, YouTube is not always a viable option for a multitude of reasons.
Well, also one of the issues of YouTube is that, say I'll be watching, something from Father Peter Ayres or, Father Josiah Trenum or whomever, and then all of a sudden an ad pops up and it's fundraising for a mosque, or it's a political ad for something that has nothing to do with religion whatsoever.
That's the best thing that could pop up. There's worse things that have popped up.
No, there's been quite a few things that have popped up, and I was like, why is the algorithm showing me an ad of something that is completely unrelated to what I'm watching? Like, it feels like it's trying to be coercive and like, oh, you've watched something that's faithful, here's the secular thing that we're going to throw in your face that has nothing to do with what you're looking for, or a completely different religion or a political movement that has nothing to do with what you've been trying to watch. I mean, for the kid stuff, some of the ads that pop up, you're like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do that's child friendly.
If you go down the rabbit hole, just on the YouTube Kids section, if you go down the rabbit hole of YouTube Kids, there's so many videos on it, how a lot of these kids' content is filled with either straight up subversive subliminal messaging, or it's straight up in your face. Just, I don't want to get into detail, but there's some really bad stuff, really degenerate and sinful stuff that these kids are watching, and unbeknownst to the parents, they say, oh, YouTube Kids, it must be already vetted, so my kids are safe to watch it, and maybe I don't, supervise them as much because
right.
Good.
On our platform, we do have like three. This is going to tie back into the ads here. Like, we have 3 different tiers of pricing. One of them in particular does have ad support on there. But what we want to do with that, Zach and I both have a marketing background, and so we know how those ads can be placed and the control that actually could be had. We want the ads that are on Logo Cinema to be Orthodox small businesses, so like lawyers, and even on Instagram, you see people who are creating tons of different Orthodox resources that could advertise on there and really reach a whole different level of audience that is already engaged. They're not fighting the Instagram algorithm for people's attention.
Right.
People sit down to watch a movie or a television show. That's their main focus. And so we really want to grow that part of the community too. I initially saw this Logo Cinema is not just like a platform for films and TV and like podcasts, but really it's a hub of Orthodox community.
Yes.
And prior to finding my wife and getting married, I dated a woman who was Mormon. And the Mormons do an incredible job at this. Like, they only really do business with other Mormons in their community at a high level. And we as Orthodox Christians, we can do a better job at that, I feel. We had a conversation with a couple of guys yesterday who were talking about the same thing.
Just one quick point on community. We, in running this business and starting it up, we wanted to imbue into how it's run, how it functions, with Christian ethics and Orthodox Christian ethics and Orthodox Christian morals. And one of those things is it's a communal faith. So we wanted to imbue that quality and that virtue into Logo Cinema, and God willing, fostering that sense of community all around the world. Eventually, we want to branch out into that.
That's the ultimate goal.
So that includes, like you said, including the ads will be Orthodox focused. It could be an Orthodox small business, or the recent marriage conference that's happening with Father Josiah Trin, having ads like that on there. And then on the creator side, helping them elevate their content. They may have, and they do have, amazing ideas and amazing creativity, but they don't have the resources, the distribution, or the team, or the people, or the money to be able to actualize on it. So
Right.
that's something that's a part of our core value as well, is helping them achieve ultimately what they want.
And then on top of that, with that community focus, especially like Zach, with you coming to the faith about what now, 3 years ago?
3 years ago. Yeah.
3 years ago. Here in the West, we're experiencing this huge boom of Orthodoxy. It's very much a resurgence to find that tradition. And I don't know at the higher levels what this looks like, but I don't think anyone expected the type of resurgence that we had. I have a brother who's in seminary at St. Vlad's, who he's always wanted to be a priest, and he was telling me that they need more priests. And I go to a church that, when my wife and I started going to, had 150 people. Now we're clearing 330 within a year and a half. We can't fit any more people in the church, but you can't turn them away. Like, that's not, you don't want to turn them away. So we need more churches and more priests. And that's a tough thing, right? To build a church is millions of dollars to do. To support a priest who can not have to work 2 jobs in order to support his family. I know from personal experience.
His flock and his family.
Yeah, my wife's priest growing up, he works full time, his wife works full time, and he's a priest. Now, luckily, their parish is still a mission and it's growing. And I think there are now about 120, 130 people. But he's actually also building the church with the church. Like, their final church building, he's doing the construction for it with the parishioners to build it. And there's beauty in that, but like, there's also this need that we need that's greater to be able to support these people. And so not only are we supporting the creators and the people who have small businesses that are Orthodox, but 10% of the profit that is made from Logo Cinema, we want to be able to direct it into all the different patriarchates to be earmarked for priests to have a livable wage, as well as being able to support building of churches. Just due to like some circumstances, maybe the parish doesn't have enough people to support like paying a livable wage to the priest. And I know that they're okay with that, but like, if there's a way we can all band together as a greater Orthodox community from around the world to support all of each other, like, this is a vehicle that we could do to essentially use that.
So how do we break down those walls? I'll give an example. When I was in college, which was quite a while ago, we went to a Russian festival in San Francisco, and a buddy of mine sat there and he said, "Oh, I want to talk to her, but I can't." I said, "Why? Are you scared?" And he looked at me and said, "No, she's red." And I had to pause for a second and realize that he was still talking about the red and white revolution and going, well, she goes to a red church, I go to a white church. We can't have that interaction because of the political divide. So even just in Russian Orthodoxy, when it was the red and white divide, there was still issues there. How do we go past that and go, you know, instead of people going, how come they helped the Romanian church and they didn't help the Serbian church? You know, the Albanians are now becoming more Christian than Muslim. This is the first time in, what is it, like 900 years that Albania is more Christian than it has been Muslim. You know, how come the Albanians aren't getting the reach? Like, you know, how do we break down those walls and go, no, we're helping the entire community from the inside out?
I think that's one of those things that people just have to do it. Like, I don't know, because this is the first time I've ever been in this like perspective, but I've always been someone who has been very active pan-Orthodoxy, mainly because I would say my heritage made me so. Mm-hmm. Being Serbian and Mexican descent, I wasn't ever fully Serbian, but I wasn't ever Arab, but I learned enough about the Arab culture to be, my friends said, honorary Arab. but I was also not
So that just means you're late
Greek
to
enough.
everything.
What was that?
That just means you're late to everything.
Yeah, yeah. But I also wasn't Greek enough or Russian enough. So like for me, I want to embrace that entire, like the differences that make up all our different cultures that are within Orthodoxy. So what makes us really unique, I think, as Orthodox Christians is that we have the church as a foundation, that I could go to a Russian church and understand the liturgy, go to an Arabic church, understand the liturgy. We're praying the same thing. We're worshiping the same exact way, but there's all these little traditions that make it really special to learn, like how those people live. It really shows you the human side of that, and it's a great example of true Pentecost in that sense, because Pentecost is when we were able to speak to each other, even though we didn't understand the language. When the apostles started speaking, every person who heard them in their own language. We use the term speaking in tongues, but that's the real crux of it, is they were able to understand at the same time. The apostles were saying things, and it didn't matter what language was being spoken, they still understood. And so I think we just need to do it like that. Like at the end of the day, like let's go ahead and drop the meme of Shia LaBeouf in there saying, just do it.
Right.
Just do it.
Yeah. No, and it's true. Like when one of the monks brought a piece of the cross from Mount Athos over here to Southern California and was at the Romanian church, I went to the service and the priest handed me the book in Romanian and he said, read. And I was like, I need the English translation. I'm not Romanian. But it still felt very comfortable and casual to just be dictated, to the point of like the priest was like, no, I expect you to read. I expect you to be a part of this, you know. And even though it wasn't a language I could speak, at least, you know, he was willing to incorporate me into what was going on.
Yeah, and that's super important for, especially with everyone who's coming into the church here in the West. We can't lose that identity, which we shouldn't, because if we want to look at, when we say the West, I think that's a broader term, but I'm going to focus on America here. America is a melting pot. And what makes us work is the fact that we are all different, and we can, in the right frame, experience someone else's culture, embrace those differences, and see the human in front of us. And I think there's a lot of like that could be turned very political, and it has been in the past, but that's not the right framework to view that in. The right framework to view it in is we're all brothers and sisters in Christ within the church, and we should celebrate those small t traditions that each different person celebrates.
So,
and I think one of the issues comes from, and I certainly don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but one of those problems, I think, Orthodoxy proves that you can come from, as we've been saying, Greek, Russian, Romanian, Serbian, but then still be united in Christ. And I only think it's when you put the political identities above your Christian identity is when there's a disconnect and such division to be drawn.
Essentially, it works when you put Christ at the center of everything. If we're all looking towards Christ, everything works out. It's the same thing with anything in life. If you put God first and you let God be God, not giving up, letting go of the wheel, but like working with God and making him the commander, it will work itself out.
You know, let's put it like this. I know you guys we're talking about doing like podcasts at some point, and, you know, probably recorded podcasts if we're in studio together, or the Zoom style that you and I are doing now. And there was a Catholic priest I had just heard the other day. Interesting guy. He's kind of funny, but he said, you know, the problem I have with the Orthodox is that they're still hiding in the bunker. They're not evangelizing, you know, as much as they should be. And one thing that bugged me with that was like, wait a minute, didn't you just see what happened in Syria, where we ended up with 27 brand new martyrs at St. Elias, and then church opened the next day with the bloodstained floors, and they still came to pray. I mean, that's a visualized evangelizing right there of unwavering faith. So how can you use the ideology of, hiding in a bunker when they still went to church the day after, and there was a funeral for 27 people, and then there was a baptism of 40 children the day after the funeral happened? So, how do we open up those dialogues with some of these podcasts with the heterodox, and sit there and go, wait a minute, you say we don't evangelize so much, but look what happened in Syria, look what happened in Lebanon, look what happened in Romania, look at what's going on, the heartbreaking situation between Russia and Ukraine, and these are siblings in Christ here. Where are you saying we're in the bunker when we're on the front lines?
There's a lot of people who deal within that sphere already who do a really great job. Jay Dyer, Andrew Wilson, actually the gentleman who is behind the camera right now that you can't see. He's actually a catechumen Marte Ruelas, who is he's a professional bodybuilder, and they do argue those points towards the heterodox. I think where Logos Cinema maybe sits in that is story is a very unifying thing, and especially when done right, it transcends not just the story you heard, but it goes deeper and it transcends its story. Zach, I'm going to let you kind of hop in here because I know he's biting at the apple. So Zach, go ahead.
Well, just a quick point. I think a lot of those stories aren't presented to people in the West, unless you're already in those Orthodox circles or are tuned in to events happening over there. People aren't hearing about that. Certainly not a lot of Protestants, maybe Catholics are tuned into it. Unfortunately, a lot of that falls on deaf ears and blind eyes in the West. So as far as evangelic efforts, I think to what Andrew was saying, using these creative methods of storytelling to tell these stories on a mass scale, to bring those stories of these martyrs, modern day martyrs, to a Western audience. And that really is the core driving factor of why we are starting this business, is, to your point, bringing those evangelic efforts, giving them a voice, I should say, giving them a voice, because not everybody hears about them, and doing so in a way that fits in the modern culture. The reason why we're doing a streaming service is because that's just the way modern culture is going. If I could snap my fingers and get rid of all the cell phones and all the computers and all the modern commodified technologies, I would, but that's just not realistic. So we have to, and I say this a lot in interviews and when I talk to people about Logos Cinema, we have to play on the same grounds that all of our competitors or enemies are playing on. Whether we like the medium or not, that's where the battle is being fought. And we have to stake our flag and start speaking by God's grace for these people, and telling these stories so people can hear.
Yeah, and on the technology piece, I actually heard Jonathan Pajot at his Symbolic World Conference last year I think it was focused on AI and talking about, like, not just the dangers, but also that there's a really hopeful piece in his talk about this thing is here. And the only way that we are going to be able to live with it is if we are able to point it towards Christ. If we don't do that, then it's all bad. But we have the tools to be able to point our tools towards where it should be pointed towards, which is God and Christ and the Trinity.
And with doing that, the streaming service itself, are you developing an app as well that's going to be run on tablets, phones, smart TVs?
Yes.
Or, because, sometimes people, it's just the website, so we got to find the balance between the connection.
No. We don't want it to be just a website. And we won't get into the technical reasons behind that, but we, from the very beginning, said we don't want it to be just like another YouTube. It's not going to be just the website you can go to. We will have a website. That way, if you are on your laptop and you want to watch something, you can go on the website, log in, and stream. But the best way to experience it will be just like if you were to log into Netflix or any other streaming platform. You go to the app, you go and tap on it, and there you go. You have the curated content for you. Like actually part of with the software provider we're utilizing, it was algorithmic based suggestions were incredibly important to us, mainly because if you're someone who's new to Orthodoxy and you download the app and you just watch one film that you're like, oh, I saw the trailer for this, I really thought it'd be cool. You watch it and then it pops up at the end like, hey, if you like this film, you're gonna like this and this. And it essentially leads people like breadcrumbs, like through the journey of like an Orthodox Christian and learning what we believe, even if it's very basic levels at first. Those breadcrumbs leading, or the seeds being planted, I should say, back to my tree analogy, being planted for Christ to be able to do what only Christ can do.
Speaking of supported devices, we want Logo Cinema to get to the point where you can watch it on your smart fridge if you wanted to.
On your smart fridge? That'd be a good one.
That's news to me. But,
No. It's a joke. It's a joke.
No, I will say, like, we are looking at other technology as well. I have this crazy idea when we were first starting this out. The Apple Vision Pro was the hot new product out. And I was very skeptical, insanely skeptical of the Apple Vision Pro because I could see a dystopian future really quick with that device. However, with that said, I think Zach and I both had the same experience when we experienced the Apple immersive video. And when I watched that, the first thing that popped into my mind was like, there could be a film that is just a divine liturgy, that through technology, we filmed the inside of the Hagia Sophia in the Apple immersive vision. And it's just a divine liturgy that's being performed. We already know that there's actually an album out there that scientists recorded the different reverb and tones that come from the inside of the building. And then they had a professional choir record it in a studio and applied the mathematical equations to it to imitate what it would have sounded like within the Hagia Sophia. And so my mind went to imagine coupling that with a rebuilt Hagia Sophia in an immersive video field. Like that would be amazing to experience what people experienced thousands and thousands of years ago within that historic church. And so immersive video, I think, is something we would definitely look into the future if it ever were to take off. And we're building the app to be expandable to address the new technologies that do come out if it is in line with our Orthodox ethics.
Going back to Zach's smart fridge idea, it's just his way of putting Lenten hymns on the door as you try to forget that it's Wednesday and you're looking at the chicken.
Sing while you're cutting, like you're cooking.
You can watch it in your Tesla. You can watch it on your smart fridge.
Yeah.
No, we also don't want people to have this replace church. Like,
right.
100%. When we first launched, we actually had a gentleman comment on our first post about this is the wrong telos, which is define telos for me, Zach.
Telos is the endpoint, the final goal, the ultimate purpose. Yeah.
And we were like, look, what you're saying is not wrong. However, like us not wanting to do, like people are going to still consume content. They're going to still go and watch like a movie on Netflix or Amazon. That's not going to go away. Like, why not give them an alternative that heightens their spiritual life, that is something that they know is not going to be bad for their soul? But it also can spark conversations at coffee hour. I think Zach and I joked about coding into the application, depending on your time zone on Sunday morning, the app will lock you out and say go to church during a divine.
I like that. I like that.
You should be going on.
And that's
then,
like 20, that's like 50% joke, 50% serious.
Yeah. We figured. I texted my brother who's studying to become a priest. He's like, you could probably do that one time, but like,
Pascha,
yeah. He's like, but people might just get annoyed with you. But I really like it, like Zach was saying, 50% joke, 50% truth right there, because we don't want this to replace you going to church. This should be something that is supplemental to your church life first and foremost. So
this is the companion piece.
What is that?
This is the companion piece.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let's take it from my standpoint, from the press side. So, in my secular work as an entertainment journalist and critic, I have access to certain press portals for various streamers and film excuse me, film studios. Is there going to be something for somebody like me where I can sit there and go through that back channel and go, hey, this movie's coming out in November. We're 2 weeks out. I'd like to talk to somebody on your PR team that I could, set up a press day and interview with the director of the film or the writer or whatever.
Yes, actually, we have been working on a PR page on the website with an RSS feed. So that way that we can set those things up. Currently, right now, we haven't had a need just because we have been starting out. And so we've been able to handle the emails. Eventually, there will be a point where we will not be able to handle all that. So there will be something built in to logocinema.com to be able to schedule those things and be able to do those press pieces. And I think it's good to note that, like, since some of this content is going to be licensed by other production houses, if you were to, like, let's use you for an example here, if you're to reach out to us, we would point you in the right direction to whoever the right PR person is to get any type of press release.
Now, Andrew, I know you know Chris from Bisenfest in Australia. Is there going to be a working relationship for a film festival like his to, say, bring it to the United States and do something similar to that?
I'm not at liberty to say right now.
Okay.
I know Chris really well, and there have been conversations had, but we cannot say definitively yet, just because I want to honor Chris and let him break that news. So I know you don't really edit these things.
No, it's all right. We'll just say it's an open discussion.
Yeah, it's an open discussion, and it looks favorable. I will say that, but I really don't want that to go out until Chris is ready.
Right. And Chris is busy in Australia doing his thing, so I'm thrilled for Chris and what he's put together.
Yeah.
As things continue to progress and we're looking forward to it, will you also be taking submission ideas? Like, will there be like a writer's submission? Or
actually, that's already going. So on the website, on logocinema.com, there is partner with Logo Cinema, which it has some details of what this looks like in terms of if you already have licensed content, how we're looking to pay you. Ultimately, we're approaching all license negotiations as a one-off per production house. What is on there is pretty much what we're working off of. However, there's different needs for different production companies. So we want to talk with those first, see what they need in order to make that work. However, with that, we also will take ideas. I think we actually have 2 people who have reached out to us with at least like 4 or 5 ideas for when we're going to start creating originals. And if it works out that they're able to get funding before we can make originals, we would love to just license the content and give them a distribution outlet, because that's kind of half the battle. If you don't have a distribution outlet, you're not going to get funding for your film. But if you have a distribution outlet, it increases your chances of being able to fund a picture astronomically. The further on down the line, kind of going and looking into the future, we want to go past just doing streaming. We want to be able to play within the theatrical space. However, that takes a lot of money to be able to get films into all the theaters. And there's a lot of major players that are not Orthodox, let alone Christian, who control the majority of that. And so it's a very expensive game to play in the theater space. But our goal is, if Logo Cinema is successful, we're going to be able to get films into theaters to continue that community in person, not just one-offs.
Yeah. We want to eventually, God willing, move into these cultural spaces, not be in our little niche corner of the internet, but eventually move into the Harkins and have it be a normal thing to see on the, when you walk up to the Harkins and see all the showtimes playing. Oh, cool, there's an Orthodox movie playing. Oh, cool, there's two or three Orthodox movies playing. To see Orthodox movie posters, to just have that be a normal part of the zeitgeist, which it really isn't right now. So to slowly move into these cultural spaces to normalize it.
I have a working relationship with Angel Studios. I've gotten pull quotes from a couple of their films. I did for Cabrini. I also did the press day for that. I just did the press day for the senior, the football film, and several others. Will there also be a component like the pay it forward aspect that they have? Like if someone can't afford a streaming service, you can like fund somebody to have a month's worth of streaming through them, or anything of that sort, something that's sort of charitable in that regard.
That's a great idea. We haven't considered that yet, just because we needed to build a working application first. I will say Angel Studios is unique in that aspect, mainly because they weren't really a streaming service until this year. They were first and foremost a website where you could go to vote on the films that you wanted to get produced. So they approached it from a little bit different of a market, and now they're entering that streaming market as well. But I would not be opposed to having that. I just think we're so early on in launching this that the only way this works is if there is enough revenue generated to run the business, to be able to support the creators, to support those Orthodox small businesses. And it's something we could consider. I'm not sure necessarily how we could do that quite yet, but I would not be opposed to it. I don't think, Zach, you would either.
No, not at all. And in fact, we've already had conversations early on about what it might look like to provide a subscription service for, say, an Orthodox men's group at a church, or some of these youth groups or something,
or even a parish, like even offering like a parish-wide subscription or a seminary-wide subscription. Like we do have that outlined in the business plan for something of that nature. But in terms of like a pay it forward, we haven't built that system out yet. So I'm not sure what that would look like, and I don't want to make any promises that we couldn't deliver upon. But in terms of group rates, eventually we do want to come out with like a family plan where multiple devices can be streaming. But where we stand currently, we're wanting to get this out to everyone first and foremost. And so the best way to do that is to keep it simple. Like kind of like the saying goes, keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I really don't want to try to make it too convoluted and give people love choice, but there's also the paralysis of choice. If there's too many options,
analysis paralysis. Yeah,
like it makes it too confusing, and I want it to be very straightforward and easily understood for the consumer. And also, our prices are very competitive within the industry. Like from our research, we're actually probably one of the least expensive options available on the market, like in general. And that was part of the original goal. We said we want to try to keep it around the price of a cup of coffee, because people will be like, yeah, I usually buy a coffee a day, but this you're getting essentially something for the whole month for the price of one coffee. And that's something, especially in the economy we live in today, it's super important to not be charging an arm and a leg. Like we could look at Disney just raised their rates. I think most streaming platforms have raised their rates exponentially.
Right.
And so we really want to try to keep that cost down so that way everyone can access it if possible.
Would there also kind of be a crowdfund component? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Legion M and how they have their buy-in for the films, and it's funded through the crowd sources, and then you'll have like, you know, a scroller of 80 people or 150 people that were donating to the film to get a producer credit on it.
No, we haven't considered that for a couple of reasons. It goes back to that keeping it simple. There's a lot of legal stuff that goes into investing into a film, and we want to leave that to those creators that are licensing the content. Anything that's Logos original is going to be essentially paid for by the profits that the company generates. So we haven't considered doing something like that because I don't want to try to make it so confusing that it can be, when it comes tax time, I want it to be as very simple to give to the government, to be like, this is what it looks like. And I don't want to have to do that. I also, like, coming from the background I did, my father was an entrepreneur, and he always told me not to, like, if you were ever to look for investment and stuff, sure, people will want to invest, but even if they have no money to invest. And you as an entrepreneur should also be careful, like, to not let people necessarily make that decision if there's no actual way they're going to get a return. And let's be honest here, film is a very risky business. Like, most of the time, films don't make their money back. And so from my perspective, if people are paying to subscribe to the app, we're going to utilize that money to be able to create the best content we can, as well as partner with the best creatives that are out there so they can create and do what they do best. That's just my philosophy. I don't think what Legion M does is bad. I just think it can get very convoluted really quick. And in a business that's already really complex, I want to keep it as simple as possible.
Gotcha. All right, so I'm going to leave you guys with this. What would you like to say to the Orthodox audience that might be a little apprehensive of going, another streaming service? Can we really trust them with our kids if we plant them? Because we saw what happened with YouTube Kids, or we saw, some of the other stuff that's going on. How do we pitch it to those that are within the faith of Orthodoxy? And also, what would you like to say to those outside of Orthodoxy that are different Christian denominations that are apprehensive in dealing with us because they essentially look at us as Catholics without the Pope?
So let's answer the second part first here. We have a simple, slogan. This past
took it right from me.
This past year, we were literally filming a documentary for the church my wife grew up at, they're raising funds to build their church. And every person we interviewed ended up saying, come and see. And that's what we've been saying with Logo Cinema is, come and see. Just come and see the stories. Come and see what Orthodoxy is about. For those who are already Orthodox, how can they trust us? Well, we're going to have to just say, come and see. Come and see what we are going to be putting out there. We want this to be a communal thing, so that's why we've been really active on the social medias, partnering with who we have been partnering with. We also, we're very transparent with what ads are going to be on there if you sign up for the ad plan. The difference between having ads on your streaming platform and not having ads is about $2. So we kept it to where it's not a huge difference, but it is a savings if you really want to have the streaming service. There is going to be ads, but know that we are partnering with Orthodox Christians to promote their products first and foremost. There is a gentleman I've been working with on our social media. OSB Alliance is the name of the Instagram. And his whole idea is to show people all the small businesses that Orthodox Christians are creating. I called him the other day and I told him, I was like, hey, while this is launching, there's going to be an opportunity here for you to be able to have a different route to promote these things. And so we're really active in the community, not just within Phoenix, but I would say for me, it's all along the West Coast. Yeah. Zach has, his spiritual father is in Sedona, Father Sebastian Craffy, but he goes to a church down here, Father Chris as well, right?
Yep.
So we're not just Orthodox in terms of, oh yeah, you chose it, I was born into it. Like it's our lives, and we really want to make it a part of our full life, not just in what we do professionally. It's a way that we can literally take the church and use our skills to better the church. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Zach.
Just two things. One, on the more pragmatic, practical side of things, for maybe Orthodox Christians who would be a little more hesitant or apprehensive based on what they've experienced with other platforms. I will say, one, we will have sort of clergy advisory board to essentially keep
Thank
us
you for reminding me.
keep us in check and the projects in check. Especially for the more theologically rich or in-depth projects that will be on there. So it's not just us relying on our own understanding of things, but essentially consulting clergy members. And on the other side of things, totally forgot what I was going to say. So that'll be my final point.
Gentlemen, remind everybody where we can find you on social media, the website, when we will be able to get the app for Apple and Android, and take us home with that.
Yeah, so you can find us online on the website, logocinema.com. Actually, that's probably one of the most important things. On there, you will find there's a little form. Part of the reason why that form is so important, as we are building this company, we are looking for investment. And I have a mentor who I gave him when we were first pitching this idea, essentially what is called the total addressable market. And he said, that's great, but what's the hard numbers? And I was like, that's a great question because here in the United States, it's really hard to account for how many actual Orthodox Christians there are. It's a little bit easier overseas, but
it ranges from, there's studies that say 1 million and there's some that say 6 million anecdotally. So it's like, okay,
where does that fall? So when I got that information, I said, you know what? I can put up a form on the website and we can see how many people fill out that form. We protect the data. We're not selling any of that data. But if you submit that form, that gives us hard numbers to say, hey, this is how many people are actually interested as of today. And that helps us a great deal because that allows us to get more content to be able to license. It allows us to spread the message further. Further, you could go to our social media on Instagram or Facebook.
It's at Logo Cinema across the board. So
yep,
on all platforms.
All of it's just at Logo Cinema. Very simple. No multiple things to remember. And we'll be posting. We're primarily focused on Instagram, but there is a Facebook component to that, and YouTube. Eventually, we'll end up placing trailers on YouTube and things of that nature of products. I should say projects that are coming out as well. Further, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our email is on the website. Zach and I both get that email, so we will definitely respond to you.
We're very responsive on social media, so please don't hesitate.
And I highly recommend if you want to go to any of the festivals, whether it's a Balkan festival, whether it's going to be strictly Serbian specific or Bulgarian specific or Greek or Lebanese or whatever, get the ad tier, figure out which churches are doing their festivals, and I'm pretty sure all of them are going to start advertising with you guys like, hey, the Greek festival is going to be over here in September. This, the Russian festival is going to be over here in November, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Logocinema.com, Logo Cinema on Instagram and Facebook. Check them out. They are very reasonably priced, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes in the first quarter of 2026.